I work maintenance at a string of gas stations along the back roads of our county. Nothing glamorous, just cleaning, stocking, and making sure the security systems don't fail. I rotate between them, but there's one I dread more than the others. Station 47, the one out past the quarry, has this eerie stillness after midnight. It is the kind of place that feels like time forgets it while the rest of the world sleeps. And last night I was called in because the night clerk hit the emergency alert. Her name was Laura. Young, quiet, barely spoke a word to me the few times we crossed paths. But something about her always struck me as nervous, like she was waiting for something bad to happen. When I arrived, the lot was empty, except for one car parked crooked by the pumps, engine running. The fluorescent sign buzzed weakly overhead as I stepped inside. The front windows were covered in smears, like someone had pressed their face and hands against the glass. Laura stood behind the counter, pale and frozen, her eyes locked on the CCTV screen above her. I asked what was wrong, but she just pointed without speaking. I turned and saw the screen. A man in a hooded coat stood just outside, unmoving, staring into the station. Not pacing, not shopping, just staring. I looked out the window, but the lot was empty now. No sign of him. She swore he'd been standing there for over 20 minutes, barely blinking. Then, without a word, he disappeared. No car drove off, no door opened. I tried to reassure her, told her it was probably a vagrant passing through, but her voice trembled when she said, "He's been here before, every week for the last month." She said he always came late, never bought anything. Just watched her, then left when someone else pulled in. I didn't like the sound of that. I told her I'd stay through her shift just to be safe. Around 2:45 a.m., the lights flickered once, then died completely. Total blackout. The buzzing of the sign stopped, the hum of the coolers went silent, and every monitor blinked to static. The backup generator should have kicked in, but it didn't. I reached for my flashlight, but just as I clicked it on, I heard a loud bang from the back door. It echoed like a shotgun blast in the dead silence. Laura screamed. I bolted around the counter, shining the light toward the hallway. Something moved, fast. A blur of shadow slipped past the restroom door. We backed into the storage room, locking the door behind us. I called 911, but the signal kept dropping. Laura sat shaking on a crate, whispering, "He told me he'd come for me." My stomach twisted. She wasn't just scared, she was waiting, preparing. I didn't know it then, but that man wasn't a stranger to her. And what was waiting beyond that door wasn't just some stalker. It was something much, much worse. We stayed in that cramped storage room for what felt like hours, the only light coming from my fading flashlight. The air grew heavy, stifling. Laura kept her eyes glued to the crack beneath the door, flinching at every creak and shift of the building. I kept telling myself help was on the way, but no sirens came. No headlights swept the parking lot. It was as if the world had forgotten this place existed. Then we heard it, the slow grind of metal scraping against concrete. It was coming from inside, from the sales floor. I shut off the flashlight. My fingers trembled against the switch. We needed silence. Whatever he was doing out there, I didn't want him knowing exactly where we were. Then came the whispering. Not loud, not angry, almost gentle. A man's voice, low and affectionate, calling her name. Over and over. Laura covered her mouth to keep from sobbing. He said he missed her, that she'd been taken from him, that he was here now. "No more hiding. No more glass between us," he said. "You're finally coming home." I grabbed a wrench from the supply bin, my knuckles white as bone around the handle. We couldn't stay in here. If the power didn't return, and if he had tools, he could break the lock eventually. I motioned toward the emergency hatch above the storage shelves, barely big enough for one of us. She nodded. I boosted her up, hands under her shoes, heart pounding as every creak in the ceiling above us felt like a death sentence. Just as she was halfway through, Something slammed into the storage door hard enough to crack the hinges. I shoved her the rest of the way up and hissed at her to run, to get to the trees behind the station. Then I turned, just as the door snapped inward. He stood there in the faint spill of moonlight from the hall. Tall, gaunt, his coat torn open to reveal a belt lined with bones, small ones, finger bones. My flashlight flickered back to life on the floor and cast a flash across his face. It wasn't rage I saw, it was joy, pure, blissful joy. He stepped forward, arms wide like he meant to embrace me. I swung the wrench with everything I had. It connected with a wet crack against his jaw, but he didn't go down. He stumbled, laughed, and lunged. I scrambled back and slipped on something slick, blood, not mine. Laura's flashlight had rolled down beside a puddle of it, but she wasn't the one bleeding. The pool led to a crate. I pulled it open, hoping for a weapon, but instead, I found a woman's severed hand, perfectly preserved, her fingernails painted black, and tucked beside it was a photo of Laura, from months ago, in her old apartment, smiling, oblivious. My breath hitched. The photo was dated, 6 months ago, long before she worked here, long before I ever met her. That meant he'd been watching her far longer than she knew. I dropped the photo, bile rising in my throat. Behind me, the man exhaled slowly, like he was savoring the moment. I turned just as he lunged again. I blocked the strike with my arm, pain searing through the bone. He was strong, unnaturally strong. He knocked me backward into the shelves, sending tools and supplies crashing down around us. That's when I heard it. Not from him, but above. The hatch door slammed shut. I thought Laura had escaped, until I saw the chain drop from the ceiling and dangle in front of me, its hook smeared with fresh blood. She hadn't made it out, or worse, she had been dragged back in. He looked up and whispered, "She always comes back." That phrase chilled me deeper than the blood soaking my shirt. I scrambled past him, smashing the flashlight into his knee. He shrieked, not in pain, but in some grotesque mix of pleasure and fury. I burst through the back hall, past the coolers, through the side exit. I ran into the woods, ignoring the sting in my ribs, the pounding in my head. Branches clawed at my skin, the cold air slicing my lungs. I ran until I could no longer hear his footsteps behind me. Eventually, I reached the service road and flagged down a delivery truck. The driver took one look at me and called the police. I told them everything. About the man, about Laura, about the blood and the hand in the crate. They sent 6 units to the gas station. But when they got there, the place was clean. No blood, no crates, no photos, no man, and no Laura. Just an empty, pristine station, fully powered, surveillance working, untouched. They reviewed the tapes, but the footage between midnight and 4 a.m. was corrupted. Nothing but static. The only proof anything had happened was my broken arm and the bruises across my body. They questioned me for hours, thinking I made it up. They never found her. Not even a shoe print in the woods. She was gone. Weeks later, I started seeing flyers on telephone poles. Not for Laura. She was never even reported missing. These were different women, all resembling her in eerie ways. Same dark hair, same soft smile. Each went missing during late-night stops at remote gas stations. Then, last night, I passed Station 47 again. It was closed, boarded up, but as I drove past, I saw something in the window. A face, not hers, his, smiling, and just beneath it, a new sign scrawled in red. "She's home now. Who's next?"